come to 1,000 nights and 1 night. Now, when it was the 33rd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the barber's 5th brother proceeded. Then I bent down my head and continue acting after this fashion till her parading and displaying are completed. Thereupon I ordered one of my eunuchs to bring me a bag of 500 dinars, which I gave as largesse to the tirewomen present, and bid them one and all lead me to the bride chamber. When they leave me alone with her, I neither look at her nor speak to her, but lie by her side with my face to the wall, showing my contempt, that each and every may again remark how high and haughty I am. Presently her mother comes in to me, and kissing my head and hands, says to me, O my lord, look upon thine handmaiden, who longs for thy favour, so heal her broken spirit. I give her no answer, and when she sees this, she rises and busses my feet many times, and says, O my lord, in very sooth my daughter is a beautiful maid, who hath never known man, and if thou show her this backwardness and aversion, her heart will break. So do thou incline to her, and speak to her, and soothe her mind and spirit. Then she rises and fetches a cup of wine, and says to her daughter, Take it to him, and hand it to thy lord. But as she approaches me, I leave her standing between my hands, and sit propping my elbows on a round cushion purfled with gold thread, leaning lazily back, and without looking at her, in the majesty of my spirit, so that she may deem me indeed a sultan and a mighty man. Then she says to me, O my lord, Allah upon thee, do not refuse to take the cup from the hand of thine handmaid, for verily I am thy bondswoman. But I do not speak to her, and she presses me, saying, There is no help but that thou drink it, and she puts it to my lips. Then I shake my fist in her face, and I kick her with my foot thus. So he let out his toe and knocked over the tray of glassware, which fell to the ground, and falling from the bench, all that was on it was broken to bits. O foulest of pimps, this comes from the pride in my spirit, cried my brother. And then, O commander of the faithful, he buffeted his face and rent his garments, and kept on weeping and beating himself. The folk who were flocking to their Friday prayer saw him, and some of them looked at him and pitied him, while others paid no heed to him. And in this way my brother lost both capital and profit. He remained weeping a long while, and at last up came a beautiful lady, the scent of musk exhaling from her, and she came up to him as she was going to Friday prayers, riding a mule with a gold saddle, and followed by several eunuchs. When she saw the broken glass and my brother weeping, her kind heart was moved to pity for him. She asked what ailed him, and he told that he had a tray full of glassware, by the sale of which he had hoped to gain his living, but it was broken. And said there befell him what thou seest. Thereupon she called up one of her eunuchs, and said to him, Give what thou hast with thee to this poor fellow. And he gave my brother a purse in which he found 500 dinars. When it touched his hand, he was well nigh dying for excess of joy, and he offered a blessing up to her. Then she returned to his abode, a substantial man, and he sat considering. Someone rapped at the door, so he rose and he opened and saw an old woman who he had never seen before. "O my son," said she, "know that prayer tide is near, and I have not yet made my wazoo oblation. So kindly allow me to use thy lodging for thy purpose." My brother answered, "To hear is to comply," and going in bade her follow him. So she entered, and he brought her a ewer wherewith to wash, and sat down like a fly with joy because of the dinars which he had tied up to his belt for a purse. When the old woman had made an end of her ablution, she came up to where he sat and prayed a 2-bow prayer, after which she blessed my brother with a godly benediction, and he, while thanking her, put his hand to the dinars and gave her 2, saying to himself, "These are my voluntaries." Then when she saw the gold, she cried, Praise be to Allah! Why dost thou look on one who loveth thee as if she were a beggar? Take back thy money. I have no need of it. Or if thou want it not, return it to her who gave it to thee, when thy glassware was broken. Moreover, if thou wish to be united with her, I can manage that matter, for she is my mistress. Oh, my mother, asked my brother, by what means and manner can I get to her? And she answered, Oh, my son, she hath an inclination for thee, but she is the wife of a wealthy man. So take the whole of thy money with thee, and follow me, that I may guide thee to thy desire. And when thou art in her company, spare neither persuasion nor fair words, but bring them all to bear upon her. So shalt thou enjoy her beauty and wealth to thy heart's content. My brother took all his gold and rose and followed the old woman, hardly believing in his luck. She ceased not faring on, and my brother following her till they came to a tall gate, when they knocked, and a Romani slave girl came out and opened to them. Then the old woman led my brother into a great sitting room, spread with wondrous fine carpets, and hung with curtains, where he sat down with his gold before him, and his turban in his knee. He had scarcely taken seat before there came to him a young lady. Never I saw fairer, clad in garments of the most sumptuous. Whereupon my brother rose to his feet, and she smiled in his face and welcomed him, signing to him to be seated. Then she bade shut the door, and when it was shut, she turned to my brother, and taking his hand, conducted him to a private chamber, furnished with various kinds of brocades and gold cloths. Here he sat down, and she sat by his side and toyed with him a while, after which she rose and sang, Stir not from thy seat till I come back to thee, and she disappeared. Meanwhile, as he was on this wise, lo, there came in to him a black slave, big of body and bulk, and holding a drawn sword in his hand, who said to him, Woe to thee! Who brought thee hither, and what dost thou want here? My brother could not return him a reply, being tongue-tied for terror. So the blackamoor seized him, and stripped him of his clothes, and bashed him with the flat of his sword blade, till he fell to the ground, swooning from excess of belabouring. The ill-omened niggard fancied that there was an end to him, and my brother heard him cry, Where is the salt, wench? Whereupon in came a handmaiden, holding in a hand a large tray of salt, and the slave kept rubbing it into my brother's wound. But he did not stir, fearing lest the slave might find out that he was not dead, and kill him outright. Then the salt girl went away, and the slave cried, Where is the subterranean gardeness? Hereupon in came the old woman, and dragged my brother by his feet, so souterrain, and threw him down upon a heap of dead bodies. In this place he lay 2 full days. But Allah made the salt the means of preserving his life by staunching the blood and staying its flow. Presently, feeling himself able to move, Al-Nashar rose and opened the trap door in fear of trembling, and crept out in the open. And Allah protected him, so that he went on in the darkness and hid himself in the vestibule till dawn. When he saw the accursed Bedlam sally forth in quest of other quarry, he followed in her wake without her knowing it, and made for his own lodging, where he dressed his wounds and medicined himself till he was whole. Meanwhile, he used to watch the old woman, tracking her at all times and seasons, and saw her accost one man after another, and carry them into the house. However, he uttered not a word. But as soon as he waxed hale and hearty, he took a piece of stuff, and made it into a bag, where he filled it with broken glass, and bound about its middle. He also disguised himself as a Persian, that none might know him, and hid a sword under his clothes of foreign cut. Then he went out, and presently falling in with the old woman, said to her, speaking Arabic with a Persian accent, Venerable lady, I am a stranger, arrived but this day here, where I know no one. Hast thou a pair of scales wherein I may weigh 1,100 dinars? I will give thee somewhat of them for thy pain. I have, son, a money changer, who keepeth all kinds of scales, she answered. So come with me to him before he goeth out, and he will weigh thy gold. My brother answered, Lead the way. So she led him to the house, and the young lady herself came out and opened it, whereupon the old woman smiled in her face and said, I bring thee fat meat today. Then the damsel took my brother by the hand, and led him to the same chamber as before, where she sat him down for a while, and then rose, went forth, saying, Stir not from thy seat till I come back to thee. Presently in came the accursed slave with a drawn sword, and cried to my brother, Up and be damned to thee. So he rose, and as the slave walked up before him, he drew the sword from under his clothes, and smote him with it, making his head fly from his body. Then he dragged the corpse by the feet to the souterrain, and called out, Where is the salt, wench? Up came the girl carrying the tray of salt, and seeing my brother's sword in hand, turned to fly, but he followed her, and he struck off her head. Then he called out, Where is the souterrain, gardeness? And then in came the old woman, to whom he said, Dost know me again, O ill-omened hag? No, my lord, she replied. And he said, I am the owner of the 500 gold pieces, whose house thou enterest to make ablution and to pray, and whom thou didst snare hither and betray. Fear Allah and spare me, cried she. But he regarded her not, and struck her with a sword till he had cut her into four. Then he went to look for the young lady, and when she saw him, her reason fled, and she cried out piteously, Home and mercy! So he spared her, and he asked, What made thee consort with this blackamoor? And she answered, I was slave to a certain merchant, and the old woman used to visit me till I took a liking to her. One day she said to me, We have a marriage festival at our house, the like of which has never been seen, and I wish thee to enjoy the sight. To hear is to obey, answered I, and rising arrayed myself in my finest raiment and ornaments, and took with me a purse containing 100 gold pieces. Then she brought me hither, and hardly had I entered the house when the black seized on me, and I have remained in this case 3 whole years, through the perfidy of the accursed Bedlam. Then my brother asked her, Is there anything of his in the house? Whereto she answered, Great store of wealth, and if thou art able to carry it away, do so, and Allah give thee good of it. My brother went, and with her, and she opened to him sundry chests wherein were money bags, at which he was astounded. Then she said to him, Go now and leave me here, and fetch men to remove the money. He went out and hired 10 men, but when he returned, he found the door wide open, the damsel gone, nothing left but small matter of coin and the household stuffs. By this he knew that the girl had overreached him. So he opened the storeroom doors and seized what was in them, together with the rest of the money, leaving nothing in the house. He passed the night rejoicing, but when morning dawned, he found at the door some 20 troopers, who laid hands on him, saying, The governor wants thee. My brother employed them hard to let him return to his house, and even offered them a large sum of money, but refused, and binding him fast with cords, carried him off. On the way they met a friend of my brother, who clung to his skirt and implored his protection, begging him to stand by him and help deliver him out of these men's hands. The man stopped and asked them what was the matter, and they answered, The governor hath ordered us to bring this fellow before him, and look ye, we are doing so. My brother's friend urged them to release him, and offered them 500 dinars to let him go, saying, When you return to the governor, just tell him you were unable to find him. But they would not listen to his words, and took my brother, dragging him along on his face, and set him before the governor, who asked him, Whence gottest thou this stuff and monies? And he answered, I prayed for mercy. So the governor gave him the kerchief of mercy, and he told him all that had befallen him from the first to the last, and the old woman, the flight of the damsel, ending with, Whatso I have taken, take of it what thou wilt, so thou leave me sufficient to support my life. But the governor took the whole of the stuffs, and all the money for himself, and fearing lest the affair come to the Sultan's ears, he summoned my brother and said, Depart from this city, else I will hang thee. Hearing and obedience, quoth my brother. and set out for another town. On the way, thieves fell foul of him and stripped and beat him and docked his ears. But I heard tidings of his misfortunes and went out after him, taking him clothes, and brought him secretly into the city, where I assigned to him an allowance for meat and drink. And presently the Caliph gave ear to the barber's tale of his sixth brother. My sixth brother, O commander of the faithful, Shakashik, or many clamors, the shorn of both lips, was once rich and became poor. So one day he went out to beg somewhat to keep life in him. As he was on the road, he suddenly caught sight of a large and handsome mansion, with a detached building wide and lofty at the entrance, where sat sundry eunuchs bidding and forbidding. My brother inquired of one of these idling there, and he replied, "The palace belongs to a Shian of the Barmaki house." So he stepped up to the doorkeeper and asked an alms of them. "Enter," said they. "By the great gate thou shalt get what thou seekest from the wazir, our master." Accordingly, he went in, and passing through the outer entrance, walked on a while, and presently came to a mansion of the utmost beauty and elegance, paved with marble, hung with curtains, and having in the midst of it a flower garden, whose like he had never seen. My brother stood a while, as one bewildered, not knowing whither to turn his steps. Then, seeing the farther end of the sitting chamber tenanted, he walked up to it, and there found a man of handsome presence and comely beard. When this personage saw my brother, he stood up to him and welcomed him, and asked him of his case, whereto he replied that he was in want and needed charity. Hearing these words, the grandee showed great concern, and putting his hand into his fine robe, rent it, exclaiming, "What! Am I in a city, and thou here and hungered? I have not patience to bear such disgrace." Then he promised him all manner of good cheer, and said, "There is no help but thou stay with me and eat of my salt." "Oh, my lord," answered my brother, I can wait no longer, for I am indeed dying of hunger." So he cried, "Ho, boy, bring basin and ewer," and turning to my brother said, "O my guest, come forward and wash thy hands." My brother rose to do so, but he saw neither ewer nor basin, yet his host kept washing his hands with invisible soap in imperceptible water, and cried, "Bring a table." But my brother again saw nothing. Then said the host, "Honor me by eating of this meat, and be not ashamed." And he kept moving his hand to and from, as if he was eating, and saying to my brother, "I wonder to see thee eating thus sparingly. Do not stint thyself, for I am sure that thou art famished." So my brother began to make as though he was eating, whilst his host kept saying to him, "Fall to, and note especially the excellence of this bread, and its whiteness." But still my brother saw nothing. Then said he to himself, "This man is fond of poking fun at people," and replied, "O my lord, in all my days I never knew aught some more winsome than its whiteness, or sweeter than its savour." The Barmecide said, "This bread was baked by a handmaid of mine, whom I bought for 500 dinars. Then he called out, "Ho, boy, bring in the meat pudding for our first dish, and let there be plenty of fat in it." And turning to my brother said, "Oh, my guest, Allah upon thee, hast ever seen anything better than this meat pudding? Now, by my life, eat and be not abashed." Presently he cried out again, "Ho, boy, serve up the marinated stew with the fatted sand grouse in it." And he said to my brother, "Up and eat, O my guest, for truly thou art hungry and needest food." So my brother began wagging his jaws, and made as if he was champing and chewing, while the host continued calling for one dish after another, and yet produced nothing save orders to eat. Presently he cried out, "Ho, boy, bring us the chicken stuffed with pistachio nuts," and said to my brother, "By thy life, O my guest, I have fattened these chickens upon pistachios. Eat, for thou hast never eaten their like." "O my lord," replied my brother, "they are indeed first rate." Then the host began motioning with his hand, as though he were giving my brother a mouthful, and ceased not to enumerate and expatiate upon the various dishes to the hungry man, whose hunger waxed still more violent. so that his soul lusted after a bit of bread, even a barley scone. Quoth the Barmecide, Didst thou ever taste anything more delicious than the seasoning of these dishes? And quoth my brother, Never, O Lord. Eat heartily, and be not ashamed, said the host. And the guest, I have eaten my fill of meat. So the entertainer cried, Take away and bring in the sweets. And turning to my brother said, Eat of this almond conserve, for it is prime, and of this honey fritters. Take this one, by my life, the syrup runs out of it. May I never be bereaved of thee, O my lord, replied the hungry one, and began to ask him about the abundance of musk in the fritters. Such is my custom, he answered. They put me a dinar weight of musk in every honey fritter, and half that quantity of ambergris. All this time my brother kept wagging his head and jaws till the master cried, Enough of this, bring us the dessert. Then said he to him, Eat of these almonds and walnuts and raisins, and of this and that, naming divers kinds of dried fruits, and be not abashed. But my brother replied, O my lord, indeed I am full, I can eat no more. Oh, my guest, repeated the host, thou have a mind to these good things eat. Allah, Allah, do not remain hungry. But my brother rejoined, O my lord, he who hath eaten all these dishes, how can he be hungry? Then he considered and said to himself, I will do that shall make him repent of these pranks. Presently the entertainer called out, Bring me the wine. And moving his hands in the air as though they had set it before him, he gave my brother a cup and said, Take this cup, and if it please thee, let me know. O my lord, he replied, it is notable good as to nose, but I am wont to drink wine some 20 years old. Knock them at this door, quoth the host, for thou canst not drink of aught better. By thy kind, said my brother, motioning with his hands as though he was drinking. Health and joy to thee, exclaimed the housemaster, and feigned to fill a cup and drink it off. Then he handed another to my brother, who quaffed it, and made as if he were drunken. Presently he took the host unawares, and raising his arm till the white of his armpit appeared, dealt him such a cuff on the nape of his neck that the palace echoed it too. Then he came down upon him with a second cuff, and the entertainer cried aloud, What is this, O thou scum of the earth? O my lord, replied my brother, thou hast shown much kindness to thy slave, and admitted him into thine abode, and given him to eat of thy victuals, and then madest him drink of thine old wine till he became drunken and boisterous. But thou art too noble not to bear with him his ignorance and pardon his offense. When the Barmeki heard my brother's words, he laughed his loudest and said, Long have I been wont to make mock of men and play the madcap among my intimates, but never yet have I come across a single one who had the patience and the wit to enter into all my humours save myself. So I forgive thee, and thou shalt be my boon companion in very sooth, and never leave me. Then he ordered the servants to lay the table in earnest, and they set on all the dishes of which he had spoken in sport, and he and my brother ate till they were satisfied, after which they removed the drinking chamber, where they found damsels like moons, who sang all manner of songs, and played on all manner of instruments. There they remained, drinking, till their wine got the better of them, and the host treated my brother like a familiar friend, so that he became as if he were a brother, and bestowed on him a robe of honor, and loved him with exceeding love. Next morning the two fell again to feasting and carousing, and ceased not to lead this life for a term of 20 years, at the end of which the Barmecide died, and the Sultan took possession of all his wealth, and squeezed my brother of his savings till he left a pauper without a penny to handle. So he quitted the city and fled forth, following his face. But when he was halfway between two towns, the wild Arabs fell on him and bound him and carried him to their camp, where his captor proceeded to torture him, saying, Buy thy life of me with thy money, else I will slay thee. My brother began to weep, and replied, By Allah, I have nothing, neither gold nor silver, but I am thy prisoner to do with what thou wilt. Then the Badawi drew a knife, broad-bladed, was so sharp-gritted that if he plunged it into a camel's throat, it would sever it clean across his jugular to the other. And he cut off my brother's lips, and waxed more instant in requiring money. But this Badawai had a fair wife, who in her husband's absence used to make advances to my brother and offer him favors, but he held off from her. One day she began to tempt him as usual, and he played with her and made her sit on his lap, when behold, in came the Badawai, who seeing this cried out, "Woe to thee, O accursed villain! Wouldst thou debauch my wife for me?" Then he took out a knife and cut off my brother's yard, after which he bound him on the back of a camel and carried him to a mountain and left him there. He was at last found by some who recognized him and gave him meat and drink, and acquainted me with his condition, whereupon I went forth to him and brought him back to Baghdad, where I made him an allowance sufficient to live on. This, then, O Commander of the Faithful, is the history of my 6 brothers, and I feared to go away without relating it all to thee, and leave thee in the error of judging me to be like them. And now thou knowest that I have 6 brothers upon my hands, and being more upright than they, I support the whole family. When the Caliph heard my story, and all I told him concerning my brothers, he laughed and said, "Thou sayest sooth, O silent man. Thou art indeed spare of speech, nor is there aught of frowardness in thee. But now go forth out of this city and settle in some other." And he banished me under edict. I left Baghdad and traveled in foreign parts till I heard of his death and the accession of another to the Caliph. Then I returned to Baghdad, where I found all my brothers dead, and chanced upon this young man, to whom I rendered the kindliest service, for without me he had surely been killed. Indeed, he slanders me and accuses me of a fault which is not in my nature, and what he reports concerning impudence and meddling and frowardness is idle and false. For verily, on this account I left Baghdad, and travelled about full many a country till I came to this city, and met him here in your company. And was not this, O worthy assemblage, of thy generosity of my nature? Then quoth the tailor of the king of China, when we heard the barber's tale, and saw the excess of his loquacity, and the way in which he had wronged the young man, we laid hands on him and shut him up, after which we sat in peace, and ate and drank, and enjoyed the good things of the marriage feast, till the time of the call to mid-afternoon prayer, when I left the party and returned home. My wife received me with sour looks, and said, "Thou goest a-pleasuring among thy friends, and thou leavest me to sit sorrowing here alone. So now, lest thou take me abroad, and let me have some amusement for the rest of the day, I will cut the rope, and it will be the cause of my separation from thee." So we took her out, and we amused ourselves till supper time, when we returned home and fell in with a hunchback, who was brimful of drink, and trolling out these rhymes: "Clear's the wine, the cup's fine, like to like thy combine. It is wine and not a cup, 'tis a cup and not a wine." So I invited him to sup with us, and went out to buy fried fish, after which we sat down to eat, and presently my wife took a piece of bread and a fit of fish and stuffed them into his mouth, and he choked. And though I slapped him long and hard between the shoulders, he died. Then I carried him off, and contrived to throw him into the house of this leech, the Jew, and the leech contrived to throw him into the house of the reeve, and the reeve contrived to throw him on the way of the Nazim broker. This, then, is my adventure, which befell me but yesterday. Is not it more wondrous than the story of the hunchback? When the king of China heard the tailor's tale, he shook his head for pleasure, and showing great surprise, said, "This that passed between the young man and the busybody of a barber is indeed more pleasant and more wonderful than the story of my lying knave of a hunchback." Then he bade one of his chamberlains go with the tailor and bring the barber out of jail, saying, "I wish to hear the talk of this silent man, and it shall be the cause of your deliverance, one and all. Then we will bury the hunchback, for that he is dead since yesterday, and set up a tomb over him." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so too do I end my tale for today.